Do you have some close friend or someone you usually interact with on a daily basis, whether it's your client or just a good friend? What is your experience with them, and how has that affected your interactions with them? The first story happened when I was considerably younger. My brother was getting married, and he was having a bachelor party at a strip club. I went there with a dozen of his high school friends. All of a sudden, a stripper came on stage, took off her top, and all the guys at our tables marveled and started applauding and screaming. I was confused, not realizing what was going on. I felt like she was looking through the stage lights right into my eyes. She was so beautiful, I couldn't take my eyes off her. But then the security guards ran up to our table, thinking trouble was starting. It turned out that all the guys in her class in middle school had attended a history class from her a couple years ago. She came up to us later and told us that she never expected to see any of her students, especially 12 guys at her bachelor party. She knew it was a whole different town and it was unfamiliar to her. The second story happened in my last semester when I was working in a massage parlor. I had a client that I particularly liked. He was friendly, positive, and so intelligent that I never inquired about his last name or job. The only thing I knew about him was that he was a student in one of the existential programs in college. Later in the semester, I had to take a chemistry exam, and near miracle, this smart client became my instructor. Neither he nor I recognized it, but we both still felt the connection we had made. When he came in for a massage, it was just a massage, but our interaction was more special. Although I was never a licensed professional, I was always honest with my clients about it. Story number 3 took place in a small town in the state of Alabama. One day a friend of mine suggested that I go to a strip club with him. There was a young girl working there who looked very young. My friend asked me if she was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. I said yes, but I had my doubts because of her age. It turned out that she was his niece. This story reminded me of when my friends took me to a strip club for a bachelor party in the mid-90s. After a few cocktails and stage performances, one girl grabbed me and dragged me on stage. She took off my pants, sat me on a chair, and tied my hands behind my back. Then to each girl in turn, I was brought up on my knees for a dance. It turned out that my ex-girlfriend was being paid for this lap dance, and it was a funny ending. This story took place after the event I attended. I was working on the sales floor of a local large chain of retail stores. One day during my lunch break, I headed into the mall, towards the food court. There I happened to meet a former acquaintance of mine. She looked a little scared. In her eyes I saw her slip her hand under my sleeve and unexpectedly kiss me on the cheek. She offered to grab a hot dog and I, stunned, agreed. Together we walked to the food court and she continued to tell me about her life. I was one of her regulars at the mall and she told me that her ex-husband was stalking her. To help her get rid of him, I decided to play the role of her husband. After lunch, I walked her to her car to make sure she was safe. She was never heard from again. This story is the fifth, despite its humor. And here's another interesting story. One evening, my best friend came into town. Although I lived in another state, we used to go clubbing together a lot. Finally, we decided to go shopping. We paid and went inside when my friend noticed a stripper lying on her back and spreading her legs for a drunk guy. He yelled loudly, "Hell yeah, that's great." Immediately afterward, the bartender came on stage and noticed my friend sitting next to me. The bartender walked over, yelled in my friend's face, "What are you doing here?" My friend immediately retreated to the corner of the room, thoroughly embarrassed. Turns out the stripper was his cousin. This is story 6. A little weird but funny. Translated with Deepl.com, free version. And another interesting story. My mom worked as a stripper when I was in elementary school. One day when I was 22, I had to meet this guy who came in and paid her for a lap dance. My mom remembered his last name and asked if he knew Ruth. I was unaware of why she asked him that, as they were obviously puzzled by the situation. It turned out that Ruth was his mom and my teacher, and he was her daughter. When my mom told him this, he begged her not to tell his mom that he had seen her in a striptease. My mom just laughed and told him that his daughter's teacher didn't know anything about it. I didn't like that teacher. She was always so silly with me, probably because we were poor and my mom didn't dress as fancy as the others. But I'm glad her kids weren't as uptight as she was herself. Another interesting story happened when I was a resident student in a college dorm. I had a few roommates who turned out to be webcam girls. I had heard rumors about this, and they were eventually confirmed when I saw an ambulance being called for them near the dorm due to their severe intoxication. When they returned to their room, I saw a camera set up on dildos and underwear sets scattered around the room. But the strangest situation was when they took a kitten into the house. I'd heard about that rumor, and it turned out to be true, but they treated the kitten very badly. Anyway, when I visited their room, one of the girls tried to play with the kitten but fell off the bed. Eventually, the whole room collapsed. This is story 7, a bit unusual. Another story. My mom was a stripper when I was in high school. One day when I was 24, I came to my room in my college dorm and saw my client standing at my door. I couldn't believe my eyes because no one knew I lived here. It turned out that he recognized my information when he saw my pictures. Even though they were blurry, he recognized my hair. He was sad that we would never see each other again and asked how I knew he was here. I guess he thought I knew his real identity. I just laughed and told him that his teacher had informed me. And it turned out his mom was a third-grade teacher I had met in my job. He begged me not to tell his mom about his visit to me. I was glad that his daughter's teacher's job kept her from knowing she was a stripper. I had always hated that teacher. She was very rude to me because of our financial situation. But I was happy that her children didn't know about it, and I didn't have to deal with her unpleasant way of speaking. Translated with DeepL.com, free version.